Okay, let's dive into an explainer that honestly just completely blurs the line between highly classified military operations and the outright paranormal. We're looking at a case today that is absolutely fascinating, not just because the claims themselves are wild, but because of exactly who is making them. I mean, tugging chunks of flesh off of me? That bizarre, honestly terrifying imagery, that doesn't come from some sci-fi novel or a horror movie. It comes directly from a highly decorated military scientist, right? So to understand why this actually matters and why we really shouldn't just brush it off as crazy talk, we've got to understand the man behind that quote. So let's talk about this military scientist, focusing on his ties to DARPA, Delta Force, and the Tora Bora mission. His undeniable credentials really just speak for themselves. We're talking about a Delta Force veteran who did 5 command tours. He was a GS-15 intelligence officer, which, if you don't know, is the civilian equivalent of a military full colonel. I mean, this guy was literally called out of retirement by DARPA to command the 2002 Tora Bora cave robotics mission. He was out there actively searching for Osama bin Laden using tactical mobile robots. And after his military career, he served as a vice president at the massive defense contractor SAIC. The main takeaway here is this: he is a highly cleared elite operator, and on top of all that, a cognitive psychology expert. To put his level of responsibility into perspective, at DARPA, he managed a massive portfolio worth $130 million. That number is absolutely crucial because it really underscores the enormous trust the United States military placed in his scientific logic and his project management. Basically, this is a man deeply rooted in data, military operations, and hard facts. Which brings us to the mountain bike incident and a terrifying 5 hours of missing time. The whole thing starts with a sudden, just gushing bloody nose out on the trail, even though he hadn't crashed or exerted himself in any unusual way. And then, within a single second, he instantly blacks out. Gone. He wakes up freezing in the dark over 5 hours later. When he finally coasts down the mountain to a local 7-Eleven, completely exhausted, completely dehydrated, a police officer is there and actually informs him that his wife had called in a missing persons report. Now, during that massive chunk of missing time, he only had this one kind of conscious, really fuzzy memory. He remembered dragging his bike toward what he thought were the bright lights of a drilling rig. He recalled seeing a fuel truck, and, this is key, inside the cab of that truck, he saw a man wearing a red plaid shirt. For whatever reason, that specific memory caused him such intense, overwhelming anxiety that he just fled the area in absolute terror. Next up, we get into what he calls the praying mantis encounter, or, as he put it, a terrifying biological tune-up. You see, Blitch's memories didn't just come flooding back all at once. Initially, he thought he just had a highly vivid, totally separate nightmare shortly after the bike incident. It was this crazy dream about a giant insect coming right through his bedroom's screen door. But later on, through hypnotic regression, he concluded that this mantis encounter wasn't some random dream at all. It was actually a deeply repressed memory stemming directly from those 5 missing hours on the mountain bike. So during this recalled encounter, he says this giant mantis supposedly communicated with him telepathically. It essentially told him that the human body is, well, merely a soul container, and to prove they could easily harm his physical body if they wanted to while being unable to touch his actual soul, the entity violently ripped flesh off his face in his mind's eye. It was this brutal, shocking way of telling him to just quit squirming while they did some forced biological tune-ups on him. And incredibly, as these memories slowly stitch themselves back together, he claims he realized something absolutely stunning about that man in the red flannel shirt from the fuel truck. Actually, it wasn't a human man at all. It was the mantis entity, wearing a red colored uniform right over its wings. I mean, talk about a perspective shift. This leads us perfectly into the psychology of contact and how an expert like him actually copes with the impossible. Seriously, how do you just ignore something impossible happening to you? Well, Blitch uses this term irrational ambivalence. It explains why he didn't immediately investigate his bloody nose, or, why he didn't freak out about his missing time. He actually noted this happened again years later in 2013, when he saw what looked like a literal mini hurricane hovering directly over his house. Instead of investigating it or going to talk to his neighbor who also saw the exact same thing, he simply felt this overwhelming compulsion to just go to sleep. It's this unnatural apathy that experiencers get, almost like a post-hypnotic suggestion telling them to just ignore the crazy stuff and get back to their normal lives. Now, there's a massive philosophical divide in how we view the whole concept of alien contact. The establishment, the government, they operate on this fear of ontological shock. Basically, the idea that society will just completely panic and break down upon learning that humanity isn't alone. But Blitch, along with a lot of other military experiencers, they firmly believe society is actually completely ready for what he calls ontological relief. That's the comfort and the vindication in finally discovering that, hey, we are just a younger species in a much larger galactic society. Of course, he gets a lot of pushback, but Blitch pushes back against online skeptics using his deep scientific background. He compares hypnotic regression to a computer's file allocation table. So think of it like an indexing tool that helps the brain stitch together scattered memory sectors that were fragmented by trauma. He also completely dismisses the whole sleep paralysis explanation people throw at him. He rightly points out that sleep paralysis absolutely does not last for 5 hours, nor does it result in your family calling police search parties or you waking up covered in physical bruises. And finally, he points to real, measurable behavioral changes in himself, like out of nowhere having this sudden, inexplicable urge to safely escort bugs out of his house in a glass instead of just squashing them.
Okay, let's pivot to something that sounds like pure sci-fi. DARPA's camouflage secrets, from cephalopods to literally invisible tanks.
While he was managing tactical robotics, Blitch got totally fascinated by cephalopod camouflage, specifically how octopuses can instantly blend into a coral reef using decentralized neural processing. Recognizing the insane military potential here, he successfully launched a massive $70 million DARPA Special Access Program to reverse engineer this biological cloaking capability. But then, just one single month later, the entire program was inexplicably canceled, just shut down with absolutely zero explanation from his superiors.
Well, the story takes a super wild turn 4 years later in 2004. Blitch claims he was just watching the news when a leaked video from Iraq suddenly aired. According to him, the footage showed an American M1 Abrams tank leading a convoy. And, moving right up onto the tank's turret, was this invisible, pixelated, fuzzy blob with limbs. It looked exactly like a cloaked human figure operating right there in an active combat zone.
Seeing this, he was understandably just stunned. And it leads us to a really fascinating question. Was his $70 million camouflage program truly canceled? Or was it simply pulled away from him and moved into a much deeper, completely unacknowledged black project? I mean, maybe they shut his program down because they had actually already figured it out.
Throughout his entire wild career, spanning from elite, highly classified military operations in the caves of Afghanistan all the way to discussing fringe alien abduction claims, Blitch maintains a strict adherence to his scientific background. He argues that we must impartially follow the logic, applying Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the right one, no matter how profoundly strange the end results become.
So, after exploring the incredibly detailed claims of this incredibly credible, high-level military witness, we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Where does highly classified human technology end and non-human intelligence actually begin? It is a question that completely challenges everything we know about reality, about science, and about the darkest secrets kept by the military. Anyway, thanks for diving into this explainer with me. Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.